Hey, this is Brian.
And Shelby.
And you're listening to the Hyperspace
PodBlast. Aren't you a little short for a podcast?
Huh? Hey, kids, we're back!
Why?
I don't know. Why not?
I guess I don't have a rebuttal.
Point, no counterpoint. Anyway, yeah, we're back. Took a week off. It was brilliant.
Yeah.
Lovely.
So what are we talking about today, Brian?
Well, as many have said, over the last several years, this is the best time to be a Star Wars fan.
The best.
There is Star Wars content everywhere.
Everywhere.
In almost, like, every conceivable form of media. I bought a parrot, forgot to tell you that. Anyway, the whole idea we're going with this week is what if there wasn't all this Star Wars content? What if Star Wars movies had ended after the original trilogy? Do you think Disney or any other company would at this point have purchased the IP and carried on the cinematic universe? Or do you think it would just be like a twinkle in George Lucas's eye?
Oh, I think someone would have bought it by now.
Do you really?
Yeah.
I don't think so, man.
With the way that everything's getting, like, brought back.
Okay, that's not a bad point. But do you think then it would have been rebooted and not carried on?
Ooh, it probably would have been... no, because it's like, you don't reboot. There's certain things that you don't reboot.
You would think, but I don't know. Actually, my original answer was going to be no. It would have just been a classic trilogy that people look to fondly for inspiration and such, but that never really saw the light of day again. But now the way that you mentioned how everything old is new again, I think someone probably would have bought the rights to it and rebooted it. Yes. Like Michael Bay style. Super Star Destroyer.
As an explosion.
Explosions.com. Yeah, it probably would have been.
Explosion, played by Mark Hamill.
He did the voiceover of the explosion.
He just does all the voices.
Yeah.
It's like, pew, pew, pew.
It's like that guy from Police Academy. Yeah, good stuff. Man. Yeah, unfortunately, I honestly think it's going to get rebooted again anyway. I think maybe not in my lifetime, but there will be a Star Wars reboot. I mean, they opened the world between worlds, so it's all possible
can we
now.
Stop? I don't want to go down this path.
Okay. But yeah, that's my original answer was going to be no, but you have changed my mind inadvertently.
Hey, how about that?
Yeah.
I'm influential.
I know. How about that? I had no idea. But you think someone would have snatched it up and carried it on?
Yeah. I mean, no one's completely rebooting Jurassic Park.
Yeah, I mean, they did. They just didn't.
Right.
And I guess some people think that's what they did with The Force Awakens, too. So
yeah.
That's another good point. On the ball today.
I'm just really smart. I can't even say it with a straight face.
Oh. Well, do you think then that they would have gone back? Because it was still episodes 4, 5, and 6. There's nothing you can do to change that. Do you think they would have filled in 1, 2, 3 or just made 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, whatever? Who knows?
I think definitely there would be something in a time before 4, 5, 6.
Yeah, I feel like as humans, we wouldn't be able to let that happen. Like, we'd get too nervous with the fact that we started at 4. They'd have to fill in that gap of 1, 2, 3.
Right. Plus, so many things that are getting spin-offs even nowadays. They're like, okay, we've already taken it as far as we can. We either have to jump way far in the future or go way far in the past to keep it fresh and keep it not derivative. And also so that we don't have to use the same actors all the time.
Or to make it derivative, but make it seem not derivative.
Like Game of Thrones, they're going way far back in time.
Oh, yeah, with their spin-off deal. They're doing some Lord of the Rings thing. So,
yeah.
I mean, I guess your point, again, is hard to argue that with the way they're just throwing content, especially with things like Netflix and all these services that just...
Imagine Netflix Star Wars.
Yeah, I feel like they just say yes to everything, honestly. Do you have a pilot? Yeah, okay, we'll run it. How many episodes do you want? I mean, look at Santa Clarita Diet. That show is horrible. And it got another season. Yeah. I don't know. That pitch had to be amazing. And then no one just watched it and they're like, okay, just do another one. Who cares?
Whatever. We'll throw money at it.
It doesn't matter.
It's fine.
Yeah, you'll watch it.
Well, how many X-Men stuff do we have going on right now? Like
Oh,
shows?
like parallel. Well, just Marvel in general, yeah. Like, but there's so many Marvel universes fighting against each other because they both exist at the same time. I mean, we even have two Quicksilvers in two different universes on or not television, but on the silver screen.
Silver screen.
Yeah, it's weird. There's like two different versions of the Fantastic Four, and neither of them fit with any universe. They just exist independently.
Let's not forget how awesome Green Lantern was.
Yeah. Deadpool won't let you forget that, which is good because it's funny. So as far as Star Wars movies go, we both agree now that there would be new ones, even though I think it would be a reboot and you think it would be some kind of new. Who do you think would buy it? Do you think it would still be Disney? I don't know who it would be.
Fox?
Maybe. Except they're selling to, maybe that would be what they would try to do to combat the MCU.
Yeah.
They would be like, all right, here, you can have this back. We're just going to take Star Wars and blow it up. Maybe. So interesting. But anyway, there were animated shows before the prequels brought about the Clone Wars, and then the Disney acquisition spawned Rebels. They weren't exactly what I'd call good or a hit or anything like that. I mean, they were like really hardline kid shows. So do you think Star Wars would have found its way back on television in an OT only AU?
Yes. Honestly, I think that it's more likely if Disney didn't pick it up, you would just have Star Wars TV shows only.
Yeah, I think this is a no-brainer. Like we were saying with the Netflix model and all the other streaming services, someone would have snatched this up and been like, yeah, we're going to throw it together.
I think you would have a live action by now.
Oh, yeah, I think they would have skipped.
Yeah, they would have skipped over any sort of animated stuff. It
Mm-hmm.
would have been just a live action, some sort of Star Wars spinoff.
Yep.
And it would have been more geared toward adults.
Probably.
And I think it would have been a little dark.
Yeah, it would have been, honestly, I could see them doing the Rise of Anakin as a series and making it
I think that would almost be better.
a lot darker, like Game of Thrones-y.
Like, think of Revenge of the Sith in a series style. Like, 1 hour shows where you're seeing, like, the development and, like, Palpatine moving all the pieces behind.
Right,
you know.
Something that starts, like, at the Clone Wars. We don't go all the way back to Anakin being a little slave
kid.
boy.
No.
We just start with him being this miraculously awesome Jedi.
And then you would see flashbacks maybe of him being a small child and like how all that happened, and you're like getting a glimpse into that. I think that's how it would go down.
True. Or, I mean, theoretically, that whole story wouldn't even be a thing.
I think that's still an important part of the story. You just don't think that someone else would have taken
right,
it
that's
that
what
way?
I'm saying. Like, if we're taking
No
George
force,
out of the equation...
No Force miracle? No midichlorians?
Yeah, right. I'm not saying that it's right or wrong. I'm just saying I don't see other people coming up with that.
Yeah.
I think it would be a very more straightforward...
I was a Jedi.
Anakin was the greatest person ever, and then he fell. Yeah, for something. It may not even been for a lady, though. You have to have a lady in the picture because otherwise there's no Luke and Leia. So
right,
that's a foregone conclusion. But I'm sure they probably would have taken that to the nth degree. Had some like Macbeth thing going on where Padme's this evil person tempting him away from being the good, honest Jedi that he is.
Oh, you think?
I can see it happening, can't you?
Maybe, yeah. I can see someone else taking
depends
it that
on
direction.
when, maybe not if it happened right now, but if it had happened when the prequels actually came out, it was someone else's idea at that point.
Oh, yeah, she would maybe be
yeah, I don't think that narrative is as...
compelling or anything. Yeah. I mean, it's not that great. I love what we have. So, no, I agree with you. I think if we had a television series, I think that's the number one thing someone would go to is Darth Vader because...
Oh, yeah.
Darth Vader...
Because Darth Vader. That's like, you can just end it. Period.
Or
because Darth Vader.
You may have something that's less focused on Darth Vader and more focused on Palpatine.
Perhaps.
But
only other thing...
It's going to be Darth Vader because he's the coolest character.
Yeah. The only thing I can see it being, if not that, would be an after. And then it would be like all the fanboys' wet dream of Luke Skywalker being a complete, total badass on TV.
Yeah.
That would be the other way that it would have gone, I think.
Yes.
And then you just have like umpteen million seasons of Luke Skywalker saving the day against every possible bad guy over and over again.
Yeah.
Probably 37
probably
different
not be good
Palpatine clones. Yeah, no. Like it probably would have gotten one decent season and then just been garbage.
Probably.
But who knows? This is hypotheticals on top of hypotheticals. So,
Yeah.
but I think we both hardcore agree that had the movie stopped at the OT at this point in time, there would be some kind of Star Wars show. Even if it was over by now, it would have happened. I think that's undoubtedly true.
So what about novels and comics? They existed back when there was only the original trilogy, but do you think that they'd still be going today if there was no further reaching content to draw in new and old fans alike?
I honestly don't. Like 90% don't, 10% maybe. Because there's still some franchises that get novels if you go down the fantasy sci-fi bookshelf at Barnes & Noble and you're just like, is this new or has this always been, they're still writing for this? Okay. Like, so
this fandom that I'm not a part of is still
right,
alive?
Exactly. With the internet, honestly, I feel like if there's a fandom that exists, I don't at least have like some outside awareness of that it has to be the most esoteric fandom ever, and now I want to be a part of it. But anyway, yeah, I think you might still have little books every once in a while. It wouldn't be nearly to the extent that it is now, or even to the extent that it was before. But yeah, I think it probably would have petered out. I gotta think there's a supply and demand threshold there somewhere where just no one would really be asking for new Star Wars stuff anymore.
Right, because, I mean, if you think of Star Wars fans as a whole, like what percentage of them are really into comics?
Well, comics is that's probably the lowest level of interest, I would think.
Most
like,
likely.
You
I think
have this huge umbrella of people that like Star Wars because they've seen the movies. And then the umbrella closes very rapidly.
Yeah, you probably get
people,
like 50% who would watch a TV show.
Right, exactly. To the TV shows. And then from that, it closes even more rapidly onto
books.
the novels. And then, yeah, it's like a completely closed, barely stopping any.
Yeah, it would be a very small percentage. So I don't know if that would be enough to truly support an ongoing comic series.
Right. I think the comics would get toasted for sure.
They would just come out every now and again, and
there might be like one-off novels. I don't think there could be like those extended trilogies or things like the New Jedi Order where there were 50 million books all about the same thing. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's just because I'm pessimistic, but I think that line would have died. The comics, without a doubt, they would stop. There would be no draw for that because I think they had basically died off even before Disney took over. I don't really know. I was actually never into the comics at all, so maybe I'm a bad person to talk about that. But my fandom was pretty deep, and I never touched the comics, so that's where I'm getting all of this. Comics being the lesser of all media.
Pretty deep.
Most people that listen to this show probably are way more into Star Wars than I was. But anyway, comics were not a thing for me, so I imagine they would go away. And then the novels may be a slow drip, but I can see that going away, especially if there's nothing else. I mean, if there were a TV show, as we stated, then there would probably be everything under the TV show in this sort of made-up hierarchy of content. But I'm thinking probably not. So anyway, unbeknownst to many of the even most hardcore Star Wars fans, the Old Western Games RPG was the beating heart, so to speak, of the franchise that kept it alive and ultimately paved the way for arguably the most popular non-visual Star Wars content, the Thrawn Trilogy. So do you think, if nothing else, like if all else in Star Wars failed, do you think some form of RPG would have kept going? Tabletop RPG specifically.
Most likely. I mean, that kind of stuff is, I don't know, people who are really into that are just really into it.
Mm-hmm.
And they also are very into any sort of RPG with whatever skin.
Well, yeah, and I mean, you're basically selling directly to your demographic, especially if you think about the old Star Wars fan demographic. And in theory, it wouldn't have branched out to reach more and different people had it not had any other content after the original trilogy. So I can see that being a thing, especially if it had changed hands and gotten into Wizard of the Coast's hands, who makes D&D. If they had kept it and done a Star Wars skin of 5e that they have right now, I think that probably would have been a fairly popular... Because, I mean, who doesn't want to be a Jedi, let's be honest.
Ahsoka.
Oh. Oh, man. I think she wanted to be. She was just pouting because they thought she was bad.
Oh, no.
You tried to blow us up. Go away. Oh, just kidding. You can come back. No, I don't want to. I don't want to be a dad
No,
anymore.
that is not true.
I mean,
Gosh.
it's kind of what happened.
No, it's not.
You didn't even watch it.
I know what happened.
But anyway, that's a really good answer.
But
as
I
far
think
as normal folks, though, like...
What I'm trying to say, though, is that a Star Wars RPG game would draw in people who are not just Star Wars fans. It would draw in
That's
people
true.
who are
I mean,
just fans of RPGs.
Right. People who like to play games will play like any sort of universe. They just want to play. They just want to roll the dice and be someone else. You're absolutely right. There's, I've thought about playing Call of Cthulhu, even though I don't give a rat's rump about that universe, but I'd play. I'll do some mystery solving, bruh.
Okay.
So what about video games, since you're currently obsessed with Horizon Zero Dawn?
What?
Star Wars had a pretty good thing going with the X-Wing and TIE Fighter games, especially because I love those games so much. As well as like the Dark Forces and things of that nature before the prequels. They were kind of had a head of steam going as far as Star Wars content, honestly. So do you think that would have kept going, or do you think that would have petered out had there not been anything to kind of fuel the Star Wars machine?
I don't know. I think that also would be something that would continue. I mean, you could think up all kinds. I mean, it's such a unique way of storytelling that I think it would be a very safe space to do some really different things in Star Wars.
Well, it's one of those things too where
it's
video
also
games
currently underutilized as a
my
storytelling
gosh,
device
honestly.
for Star Wars. I don't understand why we're not.
That's probably my biggest complaint about the new Star Wars is that we have 2 video games that are just a new version of the same thing.
And
we essentially have one game, and the story was good, but it's tiny, and the gameplay was really boring.
Yeah, I mean, I loved Battlefront 2, and I love the story that they told, but it was also just really unfortunate of how linear and how you couldn't, go and do things.
Right, there's not a lot of side questing, there's not a bunch of open world stuff, it's just your roller coaster.
And I don't understand why that hasn't been something that Disney has been taking advantage of, because it seems like something
that's
the
so, market's humongous.
It's a no-brainer.
Yeah.
It would be so easy, and I don't know why there's not, and maybe there is. If it happens, you heard it here that I predicted it. I don't know why they don't have a game that's open world of say Batuu.
Oh yeah, that wouldn't surprise me. Here, play what you can do if you go to Star Wars Land.
Yeah, I mean it would be a little bit lame in the sense of okay,
the cross marketing is starting to wear on me, honestly. But anyway,
I mean. You have so many options of what you want to do, and that's a safe space to tell a story about someone who is in no way related
doesn't matter to the saga.
Yep.
Yes.
It
because
would be
there's
completely
50 billion people in the Star Wars universe
and
that
there's so
make
many
no
planets.
difference.
There's so many planets that you could just be like, yeah, this is a planet.
Mm-hmm. Right, yeah, just make it up. Who cares? But, there's so many people that probably have awesome adventures and lives and do cool stuff that have no bearing on the saga, and that would be awesome to see more of that because, I like Lost Stars, and we're going to talk about how in the manga...
Imagine Lost Stars as a video game.
We don't need 17 versions of the same thing, though.
I know, but I would love it.
It would transfer well, I think. And we're going to talk about how it transfers well to manga, but it's basically, in my opinion, the Forrest Gump of Star Wars. These 2 characters were involved in everything that happened of galactic importance. And it seems like that's what we keep getting. Hey, remember how I was there during that thing you already know about? How about people that did something on some planet I didn't know about? Enfys Nest, for example. I didn't need her to be tied to the rebellion. She was awesome on her own. She could have just been the leader of this matriarchal clan of thieves, and it would have been awesome.
Yeah.
But
also,
you don't
Enfys
have
Nest
to tie
video
everything
game,
together.
I'm here for.
Yeah, just reskin Horizon Zero Dawn.
Yeah, I like it.
Enfys Zero Nest.
Enfys Zero. That makes no sense. But there's so many things you could do. Think about having someone on Alderaan, and basically the end of the game is Alderaan gets blown up.
I feel like that's way too foreshadowing. The whole time I'd be like, why am I even doing this? They're all going to blow up anyway.
Yeah,
it's kind of like how Jin saves that little girl and then she gets blown up. Yeah. Wah, wah.
But I think that regardless of Disney picking up Star Wars or any other movies being made, we would have Star Wars video games, and I think more so without having.
Oh yeah, there
movies,
would be
because
more
then-
games now than
Because then you wouldn't have to worry about like conflicting timelines.
Exactly. Well, it's like, I think Knights of the Old Republic, which is probably the quintessential Star Wars video game, came out right about the time that the prequels did. So maybe part of its popularity is based on the fact that Star Wars was on people's minds, but it had to have been in development probably way before the prequels were, because video games take forever to make. But that said, had there been no prequels and that game still come out, I think that would have really just made it even more of a popular entity, because that game is so good. I would love if there were like 4 or 5 of those. That could be one of those titles that comes out every year, and I would be pretty happy about it.
Yep. So what about fandom in general? What kind of Star Wars fan base would there be if there were only the original trilogy?
Man, I don't know. This was the hard question for me. Again, I'm pessimistic, so I want to say that it would be like super low key. Like it would remind me of the way it used to be on the old forums back before there was Star Wars Twitter and Reddits and subreddits and blah 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 blah. But I used to get on forums because, back in the day, you couldn't talk about Star Wars unless there was someone around for you to talk about it with. And if your friends didn't like Star Wars, you had to like just talk about it to yourself. So then forums came up and it was like, oh my gosh, I can talk about Star Wars with other people that like Star Wars. It's amazing. And you have like long discussions with these long posts, you know what I mean? Going back and forth with people. And I feel like, I don't know, that probably would have even petered out because...
Well, you have to have something to talk about. There has to be something new to talk about at some point.
You would think that.
And
but imagine,
there's
even
fan
now,
fiction.
look at the same arguments that happen.
Yeah, it's
over
a
and
cycle.
over.
But and I mean, maybe the new content is people. It's going to be more fan centered. It's going to be about what fans are doing.
That's true.
It would be
yeah.
about fans creating things, fans building things, fans.
Yeah, it'd be like the
getting
R2
together
builders,
and doing
the
things.
501st. It would be about like a Star Wars comic.
Yeah.
Things like that. Yeah.
It would be more centered on that. It would be more centered on what fans are doing, which I think some people are. They probably miss that a little bit.
Well, I think some people are so, to their detriment, wrongly turn up your nosy about fan content.
Yeah.
Especially now that there's this official
Now there's
canon.
real Star Wars content.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to bother with all this not real Star Wars content.
Yeah. Who
And-
cares about stories that aren't technically real in this made-up universe?
That's a good voice.
Like, do you sound like that?
They
Don't
do.
sound like that.
Don't sound like that. Here's a word of advice from Brian. Don't sound like that.
Yeah, don't be that guy.
Don't be that guy.
Don't wear the band shirt to the concert. But anyway.
Whoa. Whoa. Going too far.
Yeah, I don't know, man.
I think it would also, the demographic would be different because...
There would be we wouldn't have this young influx, I don't think.
No, I don't think you would
young
have...
people, Star Wars holds up really well compared to a lot of older movies.
Mm-hmm.
But
still, I mean...
kids now, man, they look at it and they're like, it's okay, I guess. It's kind of old. That CG's really bad. That's just what they notice because they're so used to the ridiculously good technology we have now.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's just the only way that kids would be introduced to Star Wars is if their parents
Through
were
parents, yeah. Mm-hmm.
fans. And
which is still a thing, but then they have their own stuff to keep them interested.
Right. Like, imagine kids that maybe their parents aren't fans of Star Wars, but they're really into Rebels.
Mm-hmm.
You wouldn't have that. And also, you wouldn't have a lot of women who really connected with Rey and Jen be very interested in it. I mean, sometimes people don't click with Luke's story. I do, but not everyone.
True.
And that's okay. And we're also talking about having much more diversity and representation in Star Wars now versus the original trilogy.
Yeah, obviously that wouldn't be a thing if there weren't any more movies.
Right.
And I've already talked about how the new series would be very anti-woman. The one that I made up.
Yeah, the one that...
That's not real. That I don't actually think that way. Don't be mad at me.
Don't be mad at me. What would probably happen is what you're trying to say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can see it going that way is what I'm trying to say.
And it's not to say
yes.
that women back in the day weren't interested in Star Wars, the original trilogy, but to have content that is showing and reflecting you is so compelling, and we wouldn't have the fan base that we have now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it would be It would be different, I bet. It might be more like the Star Trek fan base.
Well, I was also thinking about, I really enjoy the Hunger Games. I would say I'm a I'm a fan of the Hunger Games. And what's going on with that? Literally nothing that I know of. I mean, I'm not as big of a fan as maybe some other people, so there might be someone that's like, actually, please let me know.
Yeah, I bet there's fan content for that, like
right, but it's like a dormant fandom in a way, which is not to say it's bad or not active at all. It's just
right. Well, I mean, look at Harry Potter. I'm a huge Harry Potter fan, but I don't really care for what they're doing with it past the original set of novels.
No,
like I haven't.
Well, I do like Fantastic Beasts, but
it was fun. But I mean, that could be its own thing. It doesn't really have to be tied to Harry Potter. I don't think. And then the Cursed Child, I haven't even given any thought to whatsoever.
No, but to think about Star Wars being in that same boat is interesting. And
to think about it being like a quote-unquote dead IP.
Or just kind of trailed off. And it's like, well...
about time to hit the old dusty trail.
Star-dusty trail.
Oh, geez. And on that note, I think it is time to hit the old dusty trail.
I think so. So if you guys have opinions on what Star Wars would be like if we only had the original trilogy, please let us know on Twitter at hyperspace_pod.
Shoot us an email at hyperspacepodblast@gmail.com.
And as always, you can check out our content on hyperspacepodblast.com.
Including a new series of math problems to prove your brainiacness. Actually,
and
no,
just
to work your noodle. It's a good idea to use that thing because you don't want it to get soggy.
And don't get discouraged if you aren't getting things right. And you can always ask me questions.
I can't do it, so don't feel bad.
But it's really just to get people thinking and get people interested in the maths.
The maths. Mathematical!
All right, talk to you later, guys.
Okay, bye!
Bye!